The combat training room fell silent as Han Mira stepped onto the padded floor. 3 alien cadets waited for her in the center of the room. Each one was twice her size. The Gorlak warrior had arms like tree trunks. The Zenthari fighter stood 7 feet tall with razor-sharp claws. The third was a Hexen whose thick shell could stop laser blasts. Mira looked tiny next to them. She was only 19 years old and barely 5 feet tall. Her black hair was tied in a simple ponytail. She wore the same training clothes as everyone else, but they seemed too big on her small frame. When she spoke, her voice was so soft, the instructors had to lean forward to hear her. "Please take care of me today," she whispered to her opponents with a polite bow. The 3 aliens looked confused. Most human fighters talked loud and tried to scare their enemies. Some even screamed battle cries before fighting. But this girl spoke like she was asking for directions to the library. Instructor Park Daeho watched from the observation deck. He had trained thousands of soldiers over the years. He had never seen anyone quite like Mira. The other instructors thought she was too gentle for real combat. They said her quiet voice showed weakness. Park knew better. The combat timer started with a loud beep. The Gorlak charged first. His massive fists could crush metal. Mira stepped to the side so smoothly it looked like dancing. Her small hand touched a pressure point on his neck. The giant warrior collapsed like a falling tree. "I am sorry," Mira whispered as she helped him sit up. The Zenthari came next with claws extended. He was fast and deadly. Most fighters would try to match his speed or use brute force. Mira did neither. She waited until the last second, then grabbed his wrist. Using his own momentum, she threw him across the room. He landed hard on the practice mats. Mira walked over and offered him her hand. "Are you hurt?" she asked in her gentle voice. The Hexan was more careful now. He had seen what happened to his teammates. He approached slowly with his shell armor gleaming. Mira stood completely still. She looked like a small bird facing a tank. When he swung his heavy arm at her, she moved like water flowing around a rock. Her fingers found the gaps in his armor. 3 quick touches, and the mighty Hexan fell to his knees, unable to move. "The pressure points will wear off in 5 minutes, Mira told him softly. "Please rest until then." The training room erupted in whispers. Cadets from different worlds had never seen anything like it. The girl had defeated 3 elite fighters in less than 2 minutes. She did it without raising her voice or showing any anger. She even apologized after each victory. Park Daeho smiled as he made notes on his tablet. The other instructors were finally starting to understand. Mira was not weak because she spoke quietly. She was terrifying because she could end lives with a whisper. After the session, Park found Mira in the meditation garden. She was sitting under a small tree reading an old book. The book was written in Korean characters. It had belonged to her mother. "You did well today," Park said, sitting beside her. "I tried not to hurt them too much," Mira replied without looking up from her book. Park knew her story. 7 years ago, pirates had attacked her farming colony. The Vorthok Empire had hired them to clear humans from that sector. Mira had been 12 years old when she watched her parents die. She hid in a grain silo for 3 days before Alliance ships arrived. She was the only survivor out of 8,000 colonists. The rescue team found her still hiding. She had not made a sound for fear the pirates would return. Even when the medics tried to help her, she only whispered. Some doctors thought the trauma had damaged her voice. Park knew the truth. Mira had learned that loud voices brought death. Quiet voices kept you alive. "Your final assessment scores came in," Park said. "You ranked first in combat effectiveness. You also ranked first in tactical thinking and mission planning." Mira closed her book and looked at him. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now you get your first real assignment," Park smiled. "The Alliance cruiser Soul's Pride needs new fighters. Captain Yoon thinks you are ready." Mira nodded quietly. She had trained for this moment for 7 years. Soon she would face the Vorthok Empire again. This time, she would not be a helpless child hiding in the dark. This time, she would fight back. But she would do it in her own way. with quiet words and deadly hands. The Soul's Pride was the largest ship Mira had ever seen. The Alliance cruiser stretched for 2 miles and carried 5,000 crew members. When she stepped off the transport shuttle, her small travel bag looked even smaller in the massive docking bay. A tall soldier with surgeon stripes approached her. "You must be the new fighter," he said, looking down at her. "I am Sergeant O'Kyung. Follow me to meet your squad." Mira bowed politely. "Thank you for having me," she whispered. O'Kyung frowned. He could barely hear her voice over the noise of the docking bay. "You need to speak louder on a warship," he said. "People might not hear your orders in battle." "I understand," Mira replied just as quietly. The squad meeting room was full of soldiers when they arrived. 5 men and 3 women sat around a metal table. They were all bigger and older than Mira. When she entered the room, their conversations stopped. "This is your new squad member, Han Mira," O'Kyung announced. "She just finished advanced training at Kepler Station." A large man named Choi Bong-soo laughed. "She looks like she should be in school, not on a warship. Are you sure she is old enough to fight?" Mira said nothing. She found an empty chair and sat down with her hands folded in her lap. A woman with medical patches on her uniform smiled at her. "I am Kim Sola, the squad medic," she said kindly. "Do not mind Bong-soo. He thinks everyone is too young." "Thank you," Mira whispered with a small bow. The other squad members introduced themselves, but Mira could see doubt in their eyes. They had heard about the quiet girl from training, but seeing her in person was different. She looked like a strong wind could blow her away. 3 days passed quietly. Mira did her duties without complaint. She cleaned her weapons perfectly. She studied tactical manuals in the library. She ate her meals alone, while the others talked and laughed at nearby tables. Kim Sola often sat with her during meals. The medic was curious about the girl who spoke in whispers. "Where did you learn to fight?" she asked one day. "Many places," Mira replied softly. "The instructors taught me different styles from different worlds." "But why do you speak so quietly?" Sola asked gently. Mira was quiet for a long moment. "Loud voices bring trouble," she finally whispered. Before Sola could ask more questions, the ship's alarm started blaring. The captain's voice echoed through the speakers. "All combat teams to stations. We have received a distress call from civilian transport New Seoul. They are under attack by Vorthok raiders." The squad rushed to the armory. Everyone grabbed their weapons and combat gear. Mira picked up a simple pulse rifle and checked it carefully. She also took 2 combat knives and attached them to her belt. "Listen up," O'Kyung shouted over the noise. 3 Vorthok attack ships are hitting the transport. We need to board their vessel and clear out the raiders before they kill the civilians. Choi Bong-soo stepped forward. "I should lead the boarding team. I have the most experience." To everyone's surprise, Mira raised her hand. "May I lead instead?" she whispered. The room went silent. Even the ship's engines seemed quieter. O'Kyung stared at her. "You want to lead your first mission?" "Yes, please," Mira said with a small bow. Bong-soo shook his head. "This is not training, little girl. Real people will die if we make mistakes." Commander Yoon Hajin entered the armory at that moment. He had been listening from the doorway. "Let her lead," he said firmly. "Sir," Bong-soo protested. "Park Dae-ho sent me her training records," Yoon said. "Trust me on this." 10 minutes later, they were in the boarding shuttle flying toward the damaged transport. Through the viewport, Mira could see Vorthok fighters swarming around the civilian ship like angry insects. Kim Sola checked her medical kit nervously. She had seen combat before, but never with someone so young leading the mission. Mira sat quietly with her eyes closed. She looked like she was sleeping. But inside her mind, she was planning every step of the boarding action. She knew exactly what she needed to do. The shuttle's pilot announced they were ready to dock. The squad prepared for battle. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would change how they thought about warfare forever. The boarding clamps locked onto the transport ship with a loud clang. Mira opened her eyes and stood up. The other squad members watched as she checked her weapons one final time. Her movements were slow and careful, like she was performing a ceremony. "Remember the plan," she whispered into her comm unit. "Follow my lead. Stay quiet until I say otherwise." Choi Bong-soo shook his head. "The Vorthak will hear us coming anyway. We should go in loud and fast." "Please trust me," Mira said softly. The airlock door opened with a hiss. The transport ship's corridors were dark and filled with smoke. Emergency lights flashed red every few seconds. In the distance, they could hear Vorthak voices shouting in their harsh language. Mira moved forward like a shadow. Her feet made no sound on the metal floor. The squad followed behind her, trying to match her silence. Even Bong-soo had to admit she moved like a professional. They reached the first intersection. Mira held up her hand for everyone to stop. She listened carefully, then pointed down the left corridor. 3 fingers up meant 3 enemies ahead. Kim Sola watched in amazement as Mira seemed to disappear around the corner. There was no gunfire, no shouting, just silence. Then Mira's voice came through the comm so quietly they could barely hear it. "Section 1 clear. Moving to Section 2. They found 3 Vorthak raiders unconscious in the corridor. They were still breathing, but would not wake up for hours. Mira had taken them down without making a sound. "How did she do that?" one squad member whispered. "Pressure points," Kim Sola realized. "She knows exactly where to hit them." The second section had 5 raiders holding civilian hostages in the cargo bay. This would be harder. The Vorthak were using the humans as shields. One wrong move and innocent people would die. Mira studied the situation through a small window in the door. She could see the raiders were nervous. They kept looking at the exits, expecting Alliance soldiers to come charging in with guns blazing. "I need 2 minutes," she whispered into her comm. "When I signal, rush the main door. Make noise this time." Before anyone could ask what she meant, Mira was gone. She had found an air vent and crawled inside. The squad could track her movement by the soft sounds above their heads. Inside the cargo bay, the Vorthak leader was getting angry. "Where are the Alliance dogs?" he snarled. "They should be here by now." One of his men pointed at the air vents. "What if they are trying to sneak in?" The leader laughed. "Humans are too big for those vents. They fight like animals with no brain." That was when Mira dropped from the ceiling directly behind him. Her knife found the pressure point at the base of his neck. He collapsed without making a sound. The other raiders spun around in confusion. They could not understand what had happened to their leader. In that moment of confusion, Mira moved between them like deadly wind. "Sorry," she whispered as each raider fell. The squad burst through the main door just as the last raider hit the floor. They expected to find a battle raging. Instead, they found Mira helping frightened civilians to their feet. She spoke to them in the same gentle voice she used with everyone. "You are safe now," she told a crying child. "The bad men cannot hurt you anymore." The civilian captain could not believe what he was seeing. A girl who looked like a student had just defeated 5 armed raiders by herself. She did it so quietly, he had not even known a fight was happening. "Thank you," he said to Mira. "You saved our lives." Mira bowed politely. "I am glad everyone is safe." On the way back to Seoul's Pride, the squad was unusually quiet. They had seen something that changed how they thought about combat. Mira had not used brute force or advanced weapons. She used her brain and precise movements. Kim Sola sat next to Mira in the shuttle. "That was incredible," she said. "I have never seen anything like it." "My teachers said fighting is like art," Mira whispered. "You must know when to be loud and when to be quiet, when to be hard and when to be soft." Word of the mission spread quickly through the ship. By the next day, everyone was talking about the quiet girl who could defeat enemies without making a sound. Some called her the Whispering Death. Others said she was like a ghost that could walk through walls. Mira did not like the attention. She preferred to train alone and study in the library. But she knew the nicknames would follow her. In war, reputation was as important as skill. The planet New Buzan looked exactly like Mira remembered from her childhood dreams. Rolling green hills stretched to the horizon, dotted with small farming villages. Traditional Korean houses with curved roofs sat beside modern buildings. Rice fields reflected the morning sun like mirrors. "It looks peaceful," Kim Sola said as their shuttle descended toward the landing zone. Mira pressed her face against the window. Her breath fogged the glass as she whispered, "It looks like home." The Seoul's Pride had arrived to help evacuate New Busan. Vorthek forces were moving through this sector, destroying human colonies. Intelligence reports said they had 3 days before the enemy fleet arrived. Commander Yoon gathered all squad leaders for the mission briefing. "We need to evacuate 50,000 civilians," he said, pointing at the tactical display. "Most are farmers and their families. They have never seen real combat." Mira raised her hand. "What about the children?" she whispered. "There are about 8,000 kids under 12 years old," Yoon replied. "Getting them off planet safely is our top priority." The evacuation began at dawn. Mira's squad was assigned to Village 7 in the northern mountains. When their transport landed, she was the first one out. She stood very still, breathing the clean mountain air. The village looked exactly like her childhood home. Stone walls surrounded family compounds. Vegetable gardens grew between the houses. An old woman was hanging laundry on a line just like Mira's grandmother used to do. "Are you all right?" Kim Sola asked quietly. Mira wiped her eyes. "I am fine. We should start the evacuation." The villagers were frightened and confused. They did not want to leave their homes. Many had lived here for 3 generations. The village elder was a man named Park Min-soo who reminded Mira of her grandfather. "Why must we go?" he asked. "This is our land. Our ancestors are buried here." Mira knelt down so she was at his eye level. "The Vorthek are coming," she whispered in Korean. "They will kill everyone just like they did to my family." Park Min-soo looked into her eyes and saw the pain there. "You lost your home too," he said softly. "Yes," Mira replied. "But you can build a new home. You cannot bring back the dead." It took 6 hours to convince all the families to pack their belongings. Mira helped load the transport ships. She carried sleeping children and comforted crying mothers. She sang old Korean lullabies that her own mother had sung to her. Kim Sola watched her friend work. Mira seemed different here among the Korean families. She smiled more. Her voice was still quiet, but it carried warmth and comfort. "You would have made a good mother," Sola told her during a break. Mira looked at the children playing near the landing pad. "Maybe someday," she whispered, "when the war is over." That was when the alarms started screaming. Commander Yoon's voice crackled over the comm system. "All units prepare for combat. Vorthek advanced scouts have entered the system. They are moving faster than expected." 3 enemy ships dropped out of hyperspace above New Busan. They were smaller than the main fleet, but still dangerous. Each ship carried 50 raiders whose job was to capture strategic positions before the main invasion. "We need to hold them off until the last transport leaves," Yoon ordered. "All squads to defensive positions." Mira looked at the remaining civilians still boarding the ships. There were over 200 people, including many children. The transport captain said he needed 20 more minutes. "I will buy you the time," she told her squad. Choi Bong-soo grabbed her arm. "You cannot fight 3 ships by yourself." Mira gently pulled free. "I will not fight the ships," she whispered. "I will fight the raiders they send down." The first Vorthek dropship landed near the main road into the village. 20 raiders poured out with weapons ready. They expected to find panicked civilians running in all directions. Instead, they found empty streets and silence. Mira waited for them in the village square. She had chosen her position carefully. The old stone fountain gave her cover. The narrow streets limited how many enemies could attack her at once. The Vorthek leader was a scared veteran with metal teeth. He laughed when he saw the small human girl standing alone. "Where are your friends, little one?" he called out in broken human language. "They are protecting the children," Mira replied so quietly he had to strain to hear her. "And who will protect you?" he asked, raising his weapon. Mira drew her combat knives. "I will protect myself," she whispered. The battle that followed was unlike anything the other raiders had ever seen. The small human moved like flowing water around their attacks. She was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Her blades found gaps in their armor that should not have existed. One by one, the raiders fell. Some were unconscious. Others were too injured to fight. None were dead because Mira had learned to disable without killing when possible. When the last raider collapsed, the village square was quiet again. Mira stood among her defeated enemies, breathing hard but still standing. Her clothes were torn, and she had several small cuts, but she was alive. The transport captain's voice came over her comm. "All civilians are aboard. We are ready for departure." Mira looked around the empty village one last time. Soon the Vorthek fleet would arrive and destroy everything, but the people would live. The children would grow up somewhere else and remember their home through stories. "Goodbye," she whispered to the empty houses. Then she walked to the landing pad where her squad was waiting with amazement in their eyes. The neutral space station Unity 1 floated in empty space between human and Vorthek territory. It was built specifically for diplomatic meetings when neither side wanted to enter enemy space. The station was small and simple with no weapons and minimal defenses. Mira stood at attention in the briefing room wearing her dress uniform. The formal clothes felt strange after months of combat gear. Her medals looked too bright against the dark blue fabric. "This is a historic moment," said Alliance diplomat Kethera as she reviewed the mission details. "The first time moderate Vorthek leaders have agreed to peace talks." Commander Yoon nodded. "That is why security is so important. There are Vorthek hardliners who will do anything to stop these negotiations." Mira listened quietly as they explained her role. She would be part of a small security team protecting the human delegation. Her job was to watch for threats and stay invisible unless needed. "Why did you choose me?" she whispered when the briefing ended. "Because you understand the art of being unseen," Yoon replied. "Diplomats need guards who can protect without being noticed." The journey to Unity 1 took 2 days. Mira spent the time studying the station layout and reviewing Vorthek combat techniques. She also practiced walking silently in her dress shoes, which were much louder than combat boots. Unity 1 was smaller than she expected. The main conference room could only hold 20 people. The corridors were narrow and filled with monitoring devices to ensure no weapons were brought aboard. The human delegation arrived first. Ambassador Chen was an elderly man who had spent 40 years in diplomatic service. His aide was a young woman named Li Gina who looked nervous about her first major assignment. "Remember the protocols," Chen told his staff. "We speak only when spoken to. We show respect for their customs, even if we disagree with them." Mira took her position near the back wall where she could see the entire room. Her hands were folded behind her back in a formal stance. To anyone watching, she looked like a statue. The Vorthek delegation arrived an hour later. Their leader was a female named Thexa who was considered a moderate by her people's standards. She brought 3 advisors and 2 guards who looked uncomfortable without their weapons. "We welcome you to neutral ground," Ambassador Chen said with a formal bow. "We come seeking an end to unnecessary bloodshed," Thexa replied through her translator device. For 3 hours they discussed basic terms. Both sides wanted peace, but neither trusted the other. They argued about territory boundaries and military restrictions. Progress was slow but steady. Mira watched everything without moving. Her eyes tracked each person's movements and expressions. She noticed when the Vorthek guards shifted positions. She saw when Li Gina's hands trembled slightly from nervousness. That was when she spotted the problem. One of the maintenance workers cleaning the outer corridor was moving wrong. His steps were too quiet and too purposeful for someone doing routine work. She activated her earpiece using a tiny hand signal. "Possible threat in outer corridor," she whispered so softly that only her team could hear. Before anyone could respond, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red light. The maintenance worker and 2 others burst through the conference room door with weapons drawn. "Death to the peace talkers," one of them shouted in Vorthek language. The attackers were Vorthek hardliners who had disguised themselves as station staff. They fired energy weapons that should not have been able to get past security. Someone had helped them smuggle the guns aboard. Mira moved before anyone else could react. Her dress uniform did not slow her down. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and disarmed the first attacker with a precise strike to his wrist. The second gunman turned toward the human delegation. Mira threw her body between him and Ambassador Chen. The energy blast hit her in the shoulder, spinning her around, but she stayed on her feet. "Please stay back," she whispered to the terrified diplomats as she engaged the third attacker. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, all 3 attackers were unconscious on the floor. Mira stood over them, breathing hard with blood running down her arm from the energy burn. "Are you injured?" Vexa asked in perfect human language. Mira turned and bowed politely to the Vorthek leader. "I apologize for the disturbance," she whispered. "Please continue your important work." The room fell silent. Even the Vorthek guards looked impressed. The small human had protected both delegations without hesitation. She had been wounded defending people from both sides. Ambassador Chen helped Mira to a chair. "That was incredibly brave," he said. "It was my duty," Mira replied quietly as a medic treated her shoulder. Vexa approached them slowly. "I have heard stories about human warriors," she said. "They say you can be gentle and fierce at the same time. I thought these were just myths." "What do you think now?" Chen asked. The Vorthek leader looked at Mira, who was trying to minimize the attention she was receiving. "I think perhaps we have more to learn from each other than we realized." The peace talks continued the next day. The attack had actually brought both sides closer together. They had seen that extremists on both sides wanted to continue the war. They had also seen that some people were willing to risk their lives to protect peace. When the negotiations ended successfully 3 days later, both sides signed a preliminary ceasefire agreement. It was not full peace yet, but it was a beginning. As they prepared to leave Unity 1, Ambassador Chen found Mira packing her few belongings. "You made history today," he told her. "Your actions may have saved this peace process." Mira finished folding her spare uniform. "I hope the children on both sides will grow up in a better galaxy," she whispered. That was all the reward she needed. Fortress Vorthek Prime hung in space like a metal moon. The massive structure was the size of a small planet with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. It had never been captured in 300 years of Vorthek military history. Mira floated in zero gravity near the observation window of the assault ship. She watched the fortress grow larger as they approached. Thousands of defense platforms surrounded it like deadly flowers. Each one could kill her ship with a single shot. "Final mission briefing in 5 minutes," announced Colonel Park over the comm system. Mira pushed off from the wall and drifted toward the briefing room. The assault ship carried 50 elite soldiers from different worlds. They were the best fighters the Alliance had ever assembled. Most had been fighting the Vorthak for over 10 years. "This is it," Colonel Park said as the team gathered. "Intelligence says the Vorthak leadership is meeting inside the fortress today. If we can capture their command structure, the war could end." The mission plan was simple but dangerous. Mira would lead a small team deep into the fortress while the main assault drew attention. Her target was the command center on level 90 where the Vorthak generals were meeting. "The fortress has over 2,000 defenders," Park continued. "Most are elite guards who have never lost a battle. They will fight to the death rather than surrender." Sergeant Kim Do-yun raised his hand. "What about the civilians inside?" "There are no civilians," Park replied grimly. "Everyone inside is military personnel or government officials." Mira felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had never fought in a battle where everyone was an enemy. On previous missions, there had always been innocents to protect. This time her job was simply to defeat anyone who stood in her way. "Teams will enter through maintenance shafts," Park explained. "Mira's team takes the fastest route to the command center. The rest of us create chaos in the lower levels." Kim Sola checked her medical supplies. She would be going with Mira's team as their medic. "How long do we have once we are inside?" 2 hours maximum," Park said. "After that, the fortress defense systems will adapt to our tactics." The infiltration began at midnight. Mira's team consisted of herself plus 4 other specialists. They entered through a waste disposal port that intelligence had marked as lightly defended. The inside of the fortress was like a metal city. Corridors stretched for kilometers in every direction. Transport tubes carried supplies between levels. The air smelled of machine oil and recycled atmosphere. "Security checkpoint ahead," whispered Lee Taman, their electronics expert. Mira studied the guard post through her scope. 6 Vorthak soldiers with heavy weapons. Taking them down quietly would be difficult but possible. "Wait for my signal," she breathed into her comm. She moved through the shadows like flowing water. Her footsteps made no sound on the metal floor. The guards never saw her coming. One by one, they fell to precise strikes that left them unconscious but alive. "Clear," she whispered. They reached level 50 without major resistance, but as they climbed higher, the defenses became stronger. More guards, better sensors, automated turrets that tracked movement. "They know we are here," Sola said as alarm lights began flashing. Mira had to change tactics. Stealth was no longer possible, so she became a storm of controlled violence. She moved through the corridors, disabling enemies with surgical precision. Her team followed behind, amazed by her skill. On level 70, they encountered their first real resistance. A full squad of Vorthak elite guards blocked the main corridor. These were not regular soldiers. They were the fortress's best defenders. "Take them down," Mira whispered. The battle was fierce but brief. Mira's team had trained together for months. They moved like parts of a single machine. When the smoke cleared, all the guards were defeated. But the fighting had cost them. 2 team members were wounded. Their ammunition was running low. They still had 20 levels to climb. "We can call for extraction," Heyman suggested. "No," Mira said firmly. "We finished the mission." As they climbed higher, Mira began to change. The constant fighting was wearing on her. Her movements became more aggressive. Her whispered orders carried an edge they had never held before. On level 85, she encountered a young Vorthak soldier who could not have been older than herself. He was wounded and trying to crawl away from the battle zone. For a moment, Mira hesitated. He was no threat to her mission, but he was still technically an enemy. Her training said she should disable him to prevent him from raising an alarm. "Please," the young soldier whispered in broken human language. "I do not want to fight anymore." Mira knelt beside him. She could see fear in his eyes. Fear and pain, and the desire to live. For just a moment, he reminded her of the scared child she had been 7 years ago. "Sleep," she whispered, touching a pressure point on his neck. He collapsed peacefully. He would wake up when the battle was over. Sola watched this exchange with growing concern. She could see the toll the mission was taking on her friend. Mira was still gentle, but there was something harder in her eyes now. They reached level 90 30 minutes ahead of schedule. The command center lay just ahead, behind massive security doors. Success was within reach. But as they prepared for the final assault, Mira felt something break inside her chest. The constant violence was changing her. She could feel herself becoming the kind of person her mother had warned her never to become. "Are you ready?" Sola asked quietly. Mira closed her eyes and whispered a poem her mother had taught her. The words helped center her mind and remember who she was beneath the warrior. "Yes," she breathed. "Let us finish this." The medical bay of Soul's Pride was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Mira lay on a narrow bed with bandages covering her left arm and shoulder. The mission to Fortress Vorthak Prime had been successful, but the cost had been high. Kim Sola sat beside her friend's bed reading mission reports. The official record said Mira had single-handedly captured the Vorthak command center and secured vital intelligence. What the reports did not mention was how she had collapsed immediately afterward. "You have been asleep for 3 days, Sola said when Mira finally opened her eyes. "Did we get them?" Mira whispered. Her voice was even quieter than usual. "Yes. The Vorthak High Command is in Alliance custody. The war could be over within months." Mira tried to sit up, but pain shot through her wounded shoulder. "How many did I hurt?" Sola hesitated. The fortress had heavy casualties, Most were unconscious, but some required serious medical treatment. I tried to be gentle, Mira said so softly Sola had to lean forward to hear her. I know you did. You saved lives by ending the fighting quickly. Dr. Yang entered the medical bay carrying a tablet full of test results. He was the ship's head psychiatrist and had been asked to evaluate Mira's mental condition. How are you feeling? He asked, sitting in the chair across from her bed. Tired, Mira replied. The physical wounds will heal in a few weeks, Dang said, but I am more concerned about other kinds of damage. For the next hour, he asked questions about her childhood and her time in training. He wanted to understand how someone so young could be so effective in combat while maintaining her gentle nature. Tell me about your mother, Yang said. Mira's eyes filled with tears. She taught me poetry and how to grow flowers. She said violence was sometimes necessary, but it should never be easy. Do you think she would be proud of what you have become? Mira was quiet for a long time. I do not know anymore. I have hurt so many people. Even when I try to be gentle, the fighting still leaves scars. Yang made notes on his tablet. You show classic signs of combat stress, but also something unusual. Most soldiers either become hardened by war or they break under the pressure. You seem to be doing both at the same time. What does that mean? It means you are trying to carry an impossible burden. You want to be a perfect warrior and a perfect person. No one can do both forever. Word of Mira's condition spread through the ship. Her squad mates visited when they could. Even Commander Yoon stopped by to check on her progress. The Alliance wants to give you the highest medal for valor, he told her one afternoon. I do not want medals, Mira whispered. I want the fighting to stop. It will stop soon thanks to what you did. The Vorthak are asking for peace terms. Park Daeho arrived from Kepler Station carrying a thick folder of documents. He had been documenting Mira's service record for the military archives. Her story would be studied by future generations of soldiers. I have been analyzing your combat footage, he told her. Do you know what makes you so effective? Mira shook her head. Most fighters try to become something else in battle. They put on armor or make themselves angry. You stay exactly who you are. That confuses enemies who expect soldiers to act like soldiers. But staying myself hurts, Mira said. Every time I fight, I feel like I am betraying my mother's memory. Park sat down beside her bed. Your mother wanted you to survive. She wanted you to stay human, even in an inhuman world. I think she would say you have succeeded. Dr. Yang returned the next day with his evaluation complete. I am recommending extended rest and psychological counseling, he told Commander Yoon. For how long? At least 6 months. Mira is experiencing what we call moral injury. She is not broken, but she needs time to process what she has been through. That evening, Kim Sola found Mira standing at the observation window looking out at the stars. Her friend seemed smaller somehow, as if the weight of her experiences was physically pressing down on her. What are you thinking about? Sola asked. I was remembering my home planet, Mira whispered. Before the attack, we had a garden behind our house. My mother grew roses and jasmine. The air always smelled like flowers. Would you like to grow flowers again someday? I think I have forgotten how. My hands only know how to fight now. Sola took her friend's hand. The fingers were calloused from years of weapons training, but they were still gentle. Hands can learn new things. Hearts can heal. What if I cannot go back to being who I was before? Then you become someone new. Someone who has seen darkness but chooses light anyway. Mira leaned against the cool window. In the distance, she could see other Alliance ships heading home. The war was ending, but peace would bring its own challenges. Dr. Yang wants me to take time off from active duty, she said. That sounds wise. But what if they need me again? What if more people die because I was not there to protect them? Sola squeezed her hand. The galaxy will have to learn to protect itself. You have given enough. Mira nodded slowly. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life without constant fighting. It was a strange and frightening thought, but also somehow hopeful. Maybe I could teach, she whispered. Help train the next generation to be better than me. Better how? Stronger on the inside, less afraid of their own gentleness. Outside the window, the stars shone with cold, beautiful light. Somewhere among them was a place where Mira could find peace. She just had to be brave enough to look for it. The alarms on Earth Defense Station 7 screamed through the corridors like wounded animals. Mira woke from her medical bed and looked out the window at the nightmare-filling space. Hundreds of Vorthak warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The largest fleet anyone had ever seen was heading straight for Earth. All personnel to battle stations. Commander Yoon's voice echoed through the station. This is not a drill. The Vorthak Empire is making their final assault on humanity's homeworld. Kim Sola rushed into the medical bay, still wearing her sleek clothes. Mira, you need to get to the evacuation pods. The doctors said you are not ready for combat. Mira sat up slowly. Her shoulder still ached from the fortress mission, but she could move her arm. How long until they reach Earth? 3 hours, maybe 4. The home fleet is moving to intercept, but there are too many enemy ships. Through the window, Mira could see the orbital defense platforms powering up their massive weapons. Each platform could destroy a dozen ships, but the Vorthak had brought hundreds. The math was simple and terrifying. I am not leaving, Mira said quietly. Your injuries have not healed. You collapsed just a week ago. Mira stood up and walked to her equipment locker. Inside was her combat gear, cleaned and repaired. Earth is where it all started for humanity. If we lose here, we lose everything. Kim Sola knew there was no point in arguing. She had seen that look in her friend's eyes before. Then I am staying too. The defense briefing was held in the main command center. Every available fighter from all 7 orbital stations was present. The room buzzed with nervous energy and grim determination. The Vorthak have committed everything to this attack, Admiral Park announced. Intelligence says they are calling it Operation Final Storm. They plan to destroy Earth's population and end human resistance once and for all. Mira listened from the back of the room. She could see the tactical display showing enemy ship positions. The Vorthak formation was perfect. No gaps, no weaknesses. It was the work of their supreme commander who had never lost a battle. Each station will defend one sector of Earth's orbital space, the Admiral continued. Station 7 has the largest complement of fighters, so you get the hardest assignment. Sector 5 includes the main civilian evacuation routes. Lieutenant Oh Kyung raised his hand. What about ground forces if they break through? Earth's surface has 20 million civilians who cannot be evacuated in time. If we fail here, they will be defenseless. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. This was not just another battle. This was the moment that would decide humanity's future. After the briefing, Mira found herself in the fighter prep area, suiting up for what might be her last mission. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar routine. Check weapons. Test comm systems. Review emergency procedures. Squad leaders report to tactical planning, announced the station comm. Mira paused. She was not officially a squad leader anymore due to her medical status. But as she looked around the prep area, she realized something. The other fighters were looking at her, waiting for her guidance. Sergeant Choi Bong-soo approached her. The Admiral wants you to coordinate the defense of the civilian evacuation routes. I am not cleared for command duty, Mira whispered. Today we need the whispering death more than we need regulations. The tactical planning session lasted 1 hour. Mira studied the enemy approach vectors and civilian ship schedules. The Vorthak would reach the evacuation zone in 90 minutes. Her job was to delay them long enough for the transport ships to escape. How many fighters do I have, she asked. 42 pilots from 6 different worlds, replied the tactical officer. Most have heard about you, but few have worked with you directly. Mira nodded. She walked to the front of the planning room, where all the pilots could see her. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but somehow everyone heard every word. Today we protect the children, she said simply. Everything else is secondary. The pilots exchanged glances. They had expected a rousing speech about glory and victory. Instead, they got a quiet reminder of what really mattered. The enemy expects us to fight like angry animals, Mira continued. We will fight like humans, with precision, with purpose, with hearts that remember why we became soldiers. She paused and looked each pilot in the eyes. Some of us will not survive today, but the children will. That is enough. The final preparation took 30 minutes. Mira's shoulder throbbed as she climbed into her fighter cockpit, but she ignored the pain. Through her canopy, she could see the Vorthek fleet growing larger against the star field. All fighters launch when ready, came the order from command. 43 human fighters launched from Station 7. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they had something the enemy did not expect. They had Mira's tactical genius and her unshakable calm in the face of impossible odds. As they flew toward the approaching enemy fleet, Mira opened a comm channel to all fighters. Her whispered words carried across space to reach every pilot. Remember your training. Trust your wingmates. Protect the innocent. This is what we were born to do. The greatest space battle in human history was about to begin. Earth's survival hung in the balance, and leading the defense was a young woman who spoke in whispers but fought like thunder. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, the war was finally over. The Vorthek Empire had surrendered after losing their entire fleet in humanity's home system. The galaxy was at peace for the first time in 50 years. Mira stood in the memorial garden on Luna Station, looking at the wall of names. Thousands of soldiers from both sides who had died in the final battle were listed there. She found the names of 3 pilots from her squadron who had not made it home. You saved over 2 million civilians, Kim Sola said, joining her friend at the memorial. The evacuation ships all made it to safety because of your tactics. 18 good pilots died protecting those ships, Mira whispered. I should have found a better way. The victory celebration had lasted for weeks across human space. Mira received the Alliance Medal of Honor and a dozen other awards. Politicians gave speeches about her courage. Military historians called her the greatest tactical genius of her generation. She had attended none of the ceremonies. Dr. Yang says you are ready to return to active duty, Sola said. Admiral Park wants to offer you command of an entire squadron. Mira shook her head. I do not want to command anyone anymore. I am tired of sending people to fight. Then what do you want to do? Teach, Mira said simply. Help young soldiers learn to be strong without losing their souls. The Alliance Training Academy on New Geneva was the most prestigious military school in human space. When they offered Mira a position as combat instructor, she accepted immediately. Her first class would begin in the fall. The students who arrived were eager and nervous. Most were 18 or 19 years old from colonies across the galaxy. They had grown up hearing stories about the Whispering Death and her legendary battles. Good morning, Mira said to her first class. Her voice was so quiet the students in the back row leaned forward to hear her. I am Instructor Han. You may call me that, or simply Instructor. We will spend the next 6 months learning how to protect people without becoming monsters ourselves. One student raised her hand. Instructor, will you teach us the secret techniques you used against the Vorthek? Mira smiled sadly. There are no secret techniques, only years of practice and the wisdom to know when fighting is necessary and when it is not. The training program she developed was unlike anything taught before. Each day began with meditation and poetry reading. Students learned about different cultures and the importance of protecting civilians. Only after these lessons did they practice combat skills. Why do we start with poetry? Asked a young man named Choi Jinno. Because warriors who forget beauty become destroyers, Mira replied. Beauty reminds us what we are fighting to preserve. Her method seemed strange to some military officials, but the results spoke for themselves. Students from Mira's program showed exceptional skill in both combat and peacekeeping missions. They were effective fighters who never forgot their humanity. Years passed quietly. Mira found peace in teaching and watching her students grow. She lived in a small apartment near the academy with a tiny garden where she grew roses and jasmine. The flowers reminded her of her childhood home. On quiet evenings, she would sit in her garden and read letters from former students. They wrote about their assignments protecting trade routes and helping rebuild war-torn worlds. None had been forced to kill in the line of duty. All remembered their training about staying human. Kim Sola visited often. She had become head of medical services for the academy and worried about her friend's tendency to live alone. "Do you ever think about having a family?" Sola asked one spring afternoon as they tended the garden together. "My students are my family," Mira replied, planting new seeds. "I watch them grow and send them into the galaxy to make it better." "That is not the same thing." Mira paused in her work. "Maybe someday when I am sure the galaxy is safe for children. When young people can grow up without learning to fight." A new student approached the garden entrance. She was small and quiet with nervous eyes. Something about her reminded Mira of herself at that age. "Instructor Han," the girl whispered. "I am Lee Mina. I was assigned to your next class." "Welcome," Mira said gently. "Are you ready to learn?" "I want to be strong like you," Mina said, "but I do not want to hurt people." Mira smiled and offered the girl a small flower from her garden. "Then you have already learned the most important lesson. Come, let me show you how to be strong and gentle at the same time." As they walked toward the academy building, Mira felt something she had not experienced in years: hope for the future. These young people would create a better galaxy than the one she had fought to save. Behind them in the garden, the flowers swayed in the gentle breeze. They had grown from seeds saved from a world destroyed long ago. Now they bloomed again under an alien sun, proving that beauty could survive even the darkest times. The war was over. The healing had begun. And somewhere in a small garden, a soft-spoken teacher was nurturing the next generation of guardians who would protect the peace she had helped create. "When you carry the power to destroy," Mira told her new student as they entered the classroom, "you must also carry the wisdom to whisper. The galaxy has heard enough screaming."